Let's talk about Wilmington, North Carolina, shall we? I think we should.
3, 2, 1, lift off.
Before European settlers ever arrived, it wasn't a lake at all. It was woods and marshland, home to Native Americans who hunted and fished this land long before it had a name. And the pottery they left behind still turns up in the ground today. Then in 1730, Dr. Samuel Green dammed the creeks using enslaved labor, built a millpond and a mill, and established a 470-acre rice plantation right here in what would eventually become our city. Today, it's one of our most treasured destinations in Wilmington. And trust me, by the end of the show, you're never going to look at this place exactly the same way again. Where is this place? Stay tuned. Welcome to Port City Living, the show about Wilmington, North Carolina, Unfiltered. I'm real estate agent Billy Corbett, and I serve the greater Wilmington, North Carolina area. And today, I'm doing a love letter. And this one feels personal because I have walked those roads and paths more times than I can count. And I had no idea how much history was sitting right underneath my feet. So where is this Wilmington treasure, you ask? Well, it's our beloved Greenfield Lake. Let's go back to the beginning, and I mean the real beginning. We're talking 1730, when I was just a little boy, a full 9 years before the city of Wilmington was even incorporated. Dr. Samuel Green, who was a local physician, a planter, and a city official, looked at this confluence of 5 creeks south of what would become downtown Wilmington, and he saw an opportunity. He dammed up those creeks, he flooded the low-lying land, and created a mill pond that would power his rice operation. He called it Greenfield's Gardens, and for generations it functioned as a working plantation. 470 acres of rice fields operated on the backs of slave labor. That's a foundation of the place where some of you take your morning and afternoon walks, and that's a history that deserves to be said out loud. Here's something that may surprise most locals. The place we call Greenfield Lake has actually gone by several names over the centuries, and for a long time, nobody called it Greenfield anything. By the early 1900s, it had become known as McElhenney's Pond, named after Thomas McElhenney, who was the owner by that point. Swimmers flocked there in the summer, and I'm talking about swimmers swimming in that lake with alligators. That's a frightening thought, which honestly tracks for Wilmington, actually. And young men would rent rowboats and take their sweethearts out among the water lilies and the cypress trees. Sounds very idyllic, and it probably was, if you don't think too hard about those gators. It wasn't until the city of Wilmington purchased the property in 1925 for $25,000 that it started becoming the park we know it today, which in today's money would equate to $471,000. It's really a really good deal, actually, for what we now know is one of the most beloved green spaces in our entire city. Now, here's something that you might find interesting. Before it became a public park, Greenfield Lake had a whole amusement park on its grounds. Back in 1918, a carnival opened up right there on the banks of the lake. And we're not talking about a few ring toss games. We're talking about a full-on roller coaster, a performance space, and a little train that ran around the property. Wilmington had an amusement park wrapped around a rice plantation mill pond, and somehow today nobody seems to talk about that. If that's not a Port City Living story, I don't know what is. But the part that really got me was the zoo. Yes, Greenfield Lake had a zoo that opened up around 1950, and it stuck around until the early 1980s. Over the years, it was home to monkeys and peacocks and deer and a pony and baby alligators, of course, birds, and at one point, they had a bear named Petunia. And here's a detail that I love. A lot of those animals were donated by everyday Wilmingtonians who decided that their city needed a zoo. People showed up with their Belgian hares, a black eagle, little foxes, even a crow. Imagine living next to a lake and one day deciding, you know what would make this better? My fox. And then there were the lions. Okay, not actual lions. That would be weird to have real lions prowling around a kiddie zoo, right? No. They were two 400-pound statues. Now, here's the part that's really kind of interesting. They guarded the hunting lodge of a wealthy man named Pembroke Jones on the property we now call Landfall. One night back in 1925, a group of mischievous young men decided to make those heavy stone lions disappear from Mr. Jones' hunting lodge. And the next morning, two Wilmington families woke up to find giant stone lions sitting on their front lawn. Those lions eventually got parked on the steps of City Hall, where they sat for many years, and finally finding their permanent spot home near the entrance of the zoo. Then, at some point, they completely disappeared entirely. Now, the lion statues aren't even the most famous animal story tied to the lake. Not even close. So let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of the circus elephant named Topsy? Well, I'd bet you money you're probably thinking of the wrong one. The Topsy most people know about lived up north at Coney Island, and her story ended in a famously grim way back in 1903. We're not going to go into that, but that's the one the history books like to tell you about. But that's not our Topsy. Our Topsy has a very different ending, and it happened right here. On October 9th, 1922, the Hagenbeck-Wallace Circus rolled into Wilmington, one of the biggest circuses in the entire country at that time, right up there with Ringling Brothers. They set up 17 tents over at 13th and Ann, paraded through town, and packed in more than 5,000 people for 2 shows. And that was in the pouring rain. Wilmington, you showed up. Then after the show, a 4-ton elephant named Topsy broke loose. What followed was an 18-hour adventure that I promise you they could never have sold a ticket for. Topsy went wandering through downtown in the dark, past homes of people that had never seen an elephant, and now there was one in their backyard. She broke clean through the doors of a laundry business called Eureka Dye Works down on 2nd and Dock, and she made an absolute mess, flinging dye into every corner of the building. And here's the fun part. That building today is now Dram Yard Restaurant. And to this day, they lean into that. Topsy is their logo. They even have elephant door handles. Go see it for yourself. Get you something good to eat. But this is the part that matters to us. After her rampage, Topsy was tired and she was hot. So what did she do? She went to cool off at Greenfield Lake. She even swam across the Cape Fear River before it was all over with. And when they finally caught up with her, she was in a swamp right near the lake. Our Topsy walked the shorelines that you walk. And unlike the Topsy from up north, our girl survived her night out. They recaptured her alive, and the worst thing she left behind was a very confused dye factory and a story this city has still been telling for 100 years. When the Great Depression hit and the city had already taken ownership of the lake, something remarkable happened. Unemployed men, many of them who had recently held good desk jobs before the economy collapsed, were put to work clearing underbrush, landscaping the grounds, and building a road around the lake. And here's the part that really got me. Employed Wilmingtonians who still had paychecks donated 1 day's wages every month to fund the project, to create work for their neighbors. Man, have times changed. This community literally paid out of their own pocket to give other people something to do and a way to survive. But here's the harder side of that story too. The government supplemented the workforce with incarcerated people. As one woman remembered decades later, and I'm going to quote her here directly because this deserves to be heard, instead of prisoners playing cards, President Hoover had them put a road around the lake. They were out there on the hottest days with chains on. The road they built, that's Lakeshore Drive. The 5-mile loop you jog on every Saturday morning was built by men in chains during the Great Depression. That's worth a moment of silence next time you lace up your running shoes. Here's one more connection most people don't know. The same man who pushed to transform this swampy old mill pond into a landscape park, Dr. Houston Moore, is the same man who a few years later had the idea for what became North Carolina's Azalea Festival. The festival traces its own roots back to the Greenfield beautification work in the 1930s, and when Moore called that first planning meeting in 1947, the whole point was to celebrate the beauty of Wilmington's gardens, Greenfield, Orton, Airlie, and many others. So while the festival today lives all over the city, the spark for it really did start with one man's vision for this lake. Now, I would be doing you a huge disservice if I did not talk about what it's like to live around this lake, because after all, this is Port City Living, and yes, I am a realtor. Now, the neighborhoods that surround the lake are Summer Hill, Woodlawn, Greenfield Lake Estates, and Lake Forest. They're some of the most established and authentic in Wilmington. We're talking about brick ranches and charming bungalows, mostly built between 1940 and 1970 on real lots with mature trees and neighbors who actually know each other. Homes in these neighborhoods have been selling from anywhere between the high 200s to the mid 400s, depending on the size and condition, of course. And that's steps away from a 250-acre park with cypress trees, alligators, and a concert amphitheater. That amphitheater, it's awesome. And we're going to talk about that later in an episode coming up, so stay tuned. And if any of this has you curious about the real estate market, just reach out. All my contact information is down below in the show notes. Today, it's where you take your dog on a Tuesday morning and you watch an osprey circle overhead, or it's where your kids discover their first alligator and immediately want to tell everybody. It's where cypress trees drag Spanish moss into the water and the whole place feels like it exists slightly outside of time. And here's what I want to leave you with, and I want you to really sit with this. Greenfield Lake is a sacred place, and I use that word intentionally. The ground you walk on was shaped by people who were not there by their own choice, people who never got to enjoy what they built, people whose labor and sacrifice are woven into every inch of that shoreline, whether we acknowledge it or not. The enslaved people who built the plantation, the men in chains who built the road in that brutal summer heat. Their story is part of this place, and we owe it to them to remember that. Not in a way that makes you feel guilty for enjoying it, but in a way that makes you enjoy it even more thoughtfully and more gratefully. So go walk the lake, take your kids, take your dog, take someone you love, and have fun out there. That's exactly what it's there for. But take care of it. Pick up after yourself, and every once in a while, let yourself feel the weight of what it took to give this beautiful place to us. Wilmington is growing fast right now, and places like Greenfield Lake are the reason this city still has a soul. It's been here longer than the city itself. If we take care of it, it'll outlast us all. Well, that's my show for today. I hope you found the story about Greenfield Lake interesting. I know I sure did. If you like what you heard, please consider sharing this on your social media and with your friends and family. And before I go, I want to leave you with a quote from the great James Baldwin. And he said, "Every generation inherits a world it never made. And as it does so, it becomes responsible to that world.